So on the bench today we have the fairly new President McKinley. So this is a USA FCC certified radio. So walk into a store, buy it in the United States, perfectly legal. 40 channel AM sideband radio. I was kind of surprised to get contacted by President. This radio was actually provided free of charge, no strings attached, by President USA, or President Electronics USA. They asked me if I would like to have one to do a review on. I said, tear down and review? Sure, it's your radio to do a review on. So here it is. So how do I feel about this radio? I've had a chance to listen to it on air a little bit. Skip conditions have been in and out. They're out right now. When I first got this radio, unboxed it, had another radio on the bench working on it at the time, but I just quickly hooked it up to a power supply, slapped it in, coax up to it, turned it on, and the first thing I always like to check is, because it's a good indication of, at least to me, it seems like pride in build quality is, how accurate is the clarifier centered when you turn the radio on, brand new. It just had an alignment. It was just built. So that's what I did. Went straight to 38 lower sideband, clarifier dead centered, and guess what? Everybody sounded on channel. I let it warm up. Just sat it off to the side for, like 20 minutes or so. And this does get warm. Has lots of regulators down the side, which I'll do a tear down on this, tear it apart so you can see the inside. But after a full warm up, turned volume back up, 38 lower sideband, everybody, clarifier was still centered, and everybody still sounded fine. That's actually getting rarer and rarer nowadays. I see so many radios, brand new out of the box, you got to turn the clarifier like that damn far to be able to hear what the heck somebody's saying. That's sad and poor quality control. This one was not like that. So this is a microprocessor, actually dual microprocessor, because it has a master and a slave processors in this. But since it's microprocessor controlled, of course, we can do lots of functions with just a few controls instead of having to have a separate knob or button for every single function. So this thing has lots of features. Has memory channels. Now it only has 3 memory channels. Some people may like more than that. Me, actually, 3 is actually the perfect number. I can listen to the two local channels, kind of the standards are 12 and 17. And then I can pick, now I don't have to pick 19 because it keeps 19 as what they call the emergency channel. So if you go in to scan the memory channels, it'll scan your 3 memory channels and channel 19. But, so I could pick like 12, 17, and 24, put them into memory, and then it'll scan through those. Or you can set it to just scan through all 40 channels. This has, as they clearly indicate on the box there, automatic squelch control. So President, that's their trademark, ASC. Now you can see it says 3rd generation. I have used all of the different generations of the ASC or automatic squelch control over the years, own lots of radios that have it. Honestly, it sucks. Before. This radio, not so much. I'm actually liking it in this radio. I think over the decades, because ASC has been around quite some time, they've fine-tuned it. Now, without getting into a lot of technical details, it's actually really hard to do that if you think about it. Automatic squelch. You need to just be able to turn this knob right there. ASC comes on down here. That's all you do. You just turn the squelch knob down until the ASC kicks in, and then to turn it off, you just turn it up to where the little M's indicated there, and it goes off, and it turns into a normal squelch control. But it's really hard if you think about what that ASC circuit has to do. It has to be able to differentiate between noise and an incoming signal, somebody talking you want to listen to, but both of those levels can be continuously varying, especially in a mobile radio. You're driving down the road, you drive past a gas station, it's got 100 fluorescent light tubes. The noise floor goes from down here to way up here. So yeah, ASC circuits actually have a really difficult job trying to work like they're supposed to do. You only want to hear conversations, and you never want to hear open air static. I think this one's working really good. They finally really started to iron that out over the years. Now, of course, being microprocessor controlled, we can do all kinds of fancy things with a processor. We don't need big, gigantic, complicated circuits to do that anymore. But yeah, I think that's working really well. It has Weather Channel. I actually think the weather radio works really well in this. Now, sitting here at this bench, if I put any CB radio that has a weather radio in it, sit it right here and just hook up, this is kind of my resort to field test antenna, I guess you could call it. Came off an old antique deviation meter, I think it was. But it's a UHF connector. Usually when I use this antenna, hook it up to a radio, just sitting here on the bench surrounded by all kinds of test equipment, metal, this is a RF hole where where I'm sitting here. With this antenna, I can usually clearly pick up my two local NOAA weather radio stations. I have one located to the north of me, that direction, and I have one almost 180 degrees in the other direction down in Maryland, and I'm located pretty much right in the middle between those two. There's a third station, however, that I can hear on all the other radios, but just barely. I can barely make out the broadcast from that station. This radio, it actually comes in clear. There's a little bit of static, but it's actually very clear, very understandable. So the FM receiver for the weather radio, which is a whole separate circuit with its own separate PLL, actually works really good. So impressive weather radio. Of course, it's multi-mode radio, so AM, upper and lower sideband. Has your normal noise blanker and ANL. This also has a high cut feature, so that's a high audio frequency cutoff, so it's just an audio filter. That's really good at helping to cut out static, because most of your static a lot of times is really high-pitched sound, so the high cut helps to do that. And in addition to that, this also has a tone control, which I'll get into in a minute. And of course, you can turn both of those on. Has this standard channel 9, 19 buttons. Your frequency, and you use this button for programming. Now these are multi-function buttons, so you'll see stuff written above and below. So PA, Vox. So yes, this also has Vox, or voice-operated transmit. So you don't have to push the talk button. You can use this microphone, or you can get an optional. I do not have it. I actually would need to go online. I'm not even sure if it's like a lapel clip, a headset style. I really don't know. But they sell, they tell you in the owner's manual there's an optional Vox microphone, and there's actually a jack on the back for that. But like I say, it works with the regular microphone. The alert, and then this memory 1, memory 2, memory 3. This one's scan, dual watch, lock. So if you long press this, it basically locks the control so you can't accidentally bump something. And then mic and RF gain. Now, something else this radio has, wasn't expecting to see on an FCC approved radio, variable RF output power. So you can, push this button here. You can, if you look at that bottom line there, that's the RF, actually flashing RF power. You can hear that clunking. You can actually, my communications test set over there, you can see the power actually. If I stop talking, 4.08 watts. And if I turn it down the whole way, 0.69 watts. So, now, that's the thing. You have to be transmitting to get into those functions. So RF power and mic gain, you have to be transmitting to do that. So actually you need to push this button again, and then you see the mic gains now flashing, and you can turn that down. But yeah, so that's nice to see that. This does have one design flaw, the Roger beep. And I'll get into that when I get the radio cracked open and show you some of the features. Otherwise, volume on-off control, the squelch control, which is also the ASC, or automatic squelch, does have dual clarifier. So this has a fine and a coarse. I kind of like the coarse. A lot of these coarse controls, a lot of times, they have a detent, but once you get it into that detent, it still rocks back and forth. So yeah, it's not perfectly centered, and then you'll have your fine control. Yeah, it might be off this way a little bit until you bump this coarse control again. Oh crap! Now it's not centered the other way. This one holds it. It doesn't wobble back and forth in that detent. So I like that. That works really well. Last control is your rotary channel selector or encoder switch, but it's also a push button, and that gets you into a lot of the additional features. So if you push the button here, you can see color. So this has 3 colors, green, blue, and orange. Personally, I kind of like the green. I think that's the most unobtrusive and non-retina burning out of my eyeballs color. Dimmer, so you can turn the backlight completely off up to 9. I think 5, the factory default's fine. Same thing with contrast from 0 to 9. I think 5, the factory default's perfect. Key beep, so, oh, actually I went too, let me get back to that. Key beep, so you hear that beep, so I selected that, so any button I push now it's going to beep. Roger beep, I've got that turned off, we'll get into that. SWR, oh, genius in this radio. I'll get to that as well. Tone, so you can turn the tone up or down. So, that's great. Again, with the use of the noise blanker, ANL, high cut, and a tone control, you can really help to cut out a lot of noise. And then if you don't do anything, you heard it bleep, and it just went back to normal functioning. If you don't do anything for a while. But yeah, tone control, I really like that. I think that's a great feature. A lot of radios don't have. So I just leave that centered for right now. I really need to play with that until I can find my happy spot, what I like it to be. Now, actually, let me explain the SWR in this. President, you need to go. I don't know who had the idea and then who the engineer was that designed how this functions. If it was the same person or both people, go pat them on the back, kiss them for me. I don't care. Gee, brilliant. This is, I don't want to say it's groundbreaking, but honestly, this is something that, there have been microprocessor-controlled radios out for a long time. I've never seen this in a CB radio, and it's brilliant. They have simplified setting your SWR. It's just ridiculously simple now. So, what I'm going to do is actually disconnect from the communications test set there. I'm going to hook up to this cable, and this cable goes over to my BK1040. Let me take that off of dummy load. So I'm on the external antenna. So, it's now connected through my BK1040 up through some meters, but the main thing is it's hooked up to an antenna tuner, so I can grossly mismatch this, the SWRs for this radio. I can make it horribly high SWRs. But I want to show you how this functions. For starters, you don't even need the microphone. We'll take the microphone off. You don't need to push the push-to-talk button to adjust the SWRs. Kind of got you wondering, Yeah, how in the hell are you going to check SWRs if you're not transmitting? The radio does it by itself. That's the genius part. So we go in to SWR. Actually, before I even do that, let me go to channel 20. Make sure there's nobody there. Now, when it's doing this, what it's going to do is transmit and turn off. Transmit, turn off. It's going to transmit, it's going to key, unkey, and it does it at a reduced power. But I want to make sure I'm on a channel there's nobody on. So, okay, we're on a channel, there's nobody on it. Want to set our SWR on our antenna. Like I say, antenna tuner, I'm going to grossly mismatch it. This has an audio tone. It will, when your SWRs are perfectly 1.0, it'll be a continuous tone. The farther you get away from the perfect ideal SWR, it'll beep really fast, and then the beeps get longer and longer and longer. So you don't even need to look at your radio to see what the SWR is. You can be standing outside your vehicle. This will be transmitting not. Transmitting and not. It just cycles on and off. But you can hear that tone. So if you're in a big truck, you can stand out on the step, close your door, set this into SWR function, close your door, get out of your truck, as long as the window's rolled down, you've got your volume turned up, you can hear the tone. Loosen up the screw on your antenna, set screw on your antenna, move it a little bit, tighten the screw down, step back, hear what it sounds like. You don't have to continually go in, key the microphone, get in, okay, it's 3.2, get back out, try it again, get back in and test it. It's all automated. Now, there'll be 2 digits. Right now, this is the channel, 20. But when I actually do go into the SWR test, these 2 digits will actually become the SWR reading. The only thing is there's no decimal point, so 10 actually means 1.0 is the SWR. So, enough gum flapping, let's go in and take a look. So just go to where it says channel 20 SWR, don't do anything. It'll automatically do it. Matter of fact, you can hear my BK1040 over there. That's the relay clicking every time it goes into transmit. And you can see our SWR is perfect. And if I turn the volume up, you hear a really high-pitched tone. Steady, not beeping. So the SWR is 1.0. Now I'm going to reach up to my antenna tuner and start to grossly mismatch the antenna. So you can see we've got a SWR of 3.8. As I go back, the beeping will get faster. When it gets perfect, 1.0, solid tone. Now actually, the easiest way to bump out of this function is with the microphone. Just key the mic. That's brilliant! Who thought that up? Where have you been all my life? I love that. Because I actually hate adjusting antennas on cars and whatnot. Just because. In the car, out of the car. In the car, out of the car. I don't have to do that anymore. Brilliant! Performance-wise, receiver is very sensitive on this. It's, my God, I think it was, oh hell, just hook it up to the communications test set here. Get this box out of the way. It was some ridiculously low input level. So let's see here. Actually, 0.5. So, on 8, oh, I got it on 19. So there is 0.05 microvolts on channel 19. And actually, let's hook up the communications test set to the external speaker jack here. So now the dummy load, speaker dummy load is actually coming out of the speaker in that. It's actually got like a 10, almost 11 bouncing around there a little bit, but dB synad at 0.05 microvolts, minus 133 dBm. That's actually really good for AM. Usually AM's up, it can be, shoot, a half a microvolts good for 12 dB synad. This one's, I'll probably only have to go up like 1 or 2. Yeah, so 0.07 microvolts, it's up over 12 dB. 13 to 14 dB synad, it's bouncing around. And if we go for sideband, so turn off modulation, we'll do upper sideband, so 27.186, put out the carrier, and we'll switch to upper sideband. And you can see at 0.05 microvolts, 22 dB synad. That's fantastic, man. Really good signal to noise and distortion measurement. I mean, that's really good. So it's got a really sensitive receiver. Now, the only thing that does kind of, I don't want to say it concerns me, but the adjacent channel, now I've done signal to noise ratio measurements and adjacent channel rejection measurements. Now, if you do buy the book, because actually this test set has automated test procedures for doing signal to noise and adjacent channel measurements. If I do those tests, the radio meets spec in the owner's manual. They're very good specs. But quite honestly, if I do, and a lot of times that's the problem, quantitative measurements with even a big fancy piece of test equipment like that sometimes don't translate really well into the real world. Now, synad, I use synad measurements because they do translate into reality really well. The reason being, it also accounts for distortion. But a lot of times the image rejection and adjacent channel rejection measurements you take with an instrument may measure fine, but in the real world it doesn't quite mean as much to me. I think that one's really more on air. And one thing I do, this is mic measurement. So this is a measurement that I do. Like I say, it's not a quantitative measurement. I just use my ears. And what I do is I put the communications test there. Your signal generator doesn't need to be this, but on channel, but one channel off. So let's say 27.195. Now that's not actually a CB channel, but there's a missing channel after channel 19, because channel 20 is 27205. So we'll just go 10 kilohertz up from channel 19. Okay, now if I turn the volume up, okay, so let me turn the modulation on there. So right now it's only getting, this communications test set's putting out 0.05 microvolts, 1000 kilohertz audio tone modulation, 30% on 10 kilohertz up from channel 19 at 27.195. And you can hear, so let me unplug that so it's actually coming out of the speaker in the radio. So the volume is turned up the whole way, okay? You can hear the amount of static there. Now what I'm going to do is change that to 1 millivolt output. So amplitude, 1 millivolt, and listen to the sound change. Now, I know you can hear the pickup in static, but I can also hear a tone. I don't know if that's going to show up in the camera or the video or not, but I'm sitting here listening. I can hear that 30% modulation at 1 kilohertz tone. That's only 1 millivolt. Don't get me wrong, that is a booming signal, but it's in reality, a lot of other radios sound better than that. I can put 1 millivolt into a radio, one channel off. A lot of your really good, high-quality radios, you won't hear that audio tone. And that static, you'll always hear some static increase. That's just normal, because that is a big signal on the adjacent channel. But usually it's not quite as bad. Now, it's not horrible. I've heard radios that are actually horribly worse than that. But I think as far as adjacent channel rejection goes, I'm going to say it's probably about average on this radio. Really good sensitivity, really good signal to noise and distortion measurement. But adjacent channel, in reality, I think it's going to fall about average. So it's not a killer. I'm going to buy a few more of these radios because I actually like it. I think I'm going to stick one of these in a couple of vehicles, as a matter of fact. Anything else I want to cover while it's hooked up here? Oh yeah, the Roger beep. So this has a Roger beep. Let me switch over to a dummy load over on this set. Let's turn the Roger beep on. Roger beep, key beep's on. A key beep just turns on so you can actually hear it coming out of the radio. Okay, and back to the main. So I got it on a dummy load. That sound coming out of the speaker there is what you should hear on the receiving radio. So somebody listening to you on air, that's what they'll hear. When you unkey, that's your Roger beep. Now I'm going to turn off key beep, so it basically disables that on the speaker. Okay. So it's Roger beeping, but it's not actually coming out of the speaker now. Here was my problem. I had this radio hooked up over there, actually, let me reach over here, get this walkie-talkie out. I'm going to turn on the communications, or an oscilloscope, and I'll let that warm up. I swear, this thing has like 1 or 2% modulation with that Roger beep. The audio level is so ridiculously low. No one's ever going to hear it. If they do hear it, they're going to think it's somebody that's 500 or 5,000 miles away farther from you than you actually, because it's really low. So, okay, we look up there at the scope. Okay, the scope over there, and I've got it set so the bar is rather wide. And you can see as I'm talking, I'm modulating the signal there. But when I stop talking and I unkey this microphone, okay, you should see, normally Roger beeps will be somewhere between 90 to 100% modulation of those audio tones. Watch this. You see that just tiny little bit of fuzz that appears at the top and bottom of that? Yeah, that's like 2% modulation. I'll be generous. 5%. I know it's not that much, but I'll be generous. Say it's 5%. It's horribly, ridiculously low. So we'll have a radio. Now granted, this is going into a dummy load. And it doesn't matter what the cover's on or off. We'll set a radio with an antenna on it. touching this radio. Doesn't get any closer than that. I can barely hear that. If I turn it up to the point where I can actually start to hear that Roger beep, I've got the volume up so high, it starts to feed back through the microphone. Even if I try to shield the microphone underneath the bench here, it starts to feed back. It's just, you know, that's what I'm talking into the talking into the microphone. The Roger beep is so low. They really need to do that, and it's a design flaw. So let me turn it off. I'm going to pop the two covers off, and I'll start the camera back up. Okay, so here we go. First off, no speaker in the covers. I forgot to mention that. The speaker's in the front. Like I said, lots of microprocessor controls, so we don't need a lot of controls up here. Gave them real estate to stick a front-firing speaker. I think that's really nice. I actually really like that. Some people they may not like it. I do. Always seems silly to me. You stick a radio in a car. Where's the speaker pointing? The floorboard. I'm not 6 inches tall. My ears are up there. This way points the speaker right at me. Kind of makes sense. Now, you're thinking, oh, tiny speaker sounds like crap. No, actually, look at the size of the magnet on that thing for starters. The magnet is bigger than the speaker cone. Yeah, it's a huge magnet on there for that speaker. And it actually has really good, because usually tiny little speakers have a horrible bass response. Actually, this has fairly good low-end response. I was actually pleasantly surprised. So it actually sounds really good. Now, the Roger beep. Actually, before I get to the Roger beep, if I had 1 million thumbs to put up, if there was a radio that was 10 times better than this one, there's not, especially in the CB market. Maybe a $10,000 Kenwood or Icom, but that's a whole different class of radio and whole different story. But if there was a CB radio that was 10 times better than this, I would recommend this one over it probably, for the simple fact that most other radios nowadays, manufacturers won't talk to people like me. Me being somebody that works on radios. Service techs. Used to be, there was at least some form of tech support. You got at least a service manual so you could work on a radio when it broke. Not nowadays. Unidin's a perfect example. To Uniden, I am the invisible man. They don't want to hear from me. They care less. I've requested via email, phone, registered mail. No response. They will not respond to you. I want a service manual for your radios. They won't talk to you. When President asked me if I wanted to review one of these radios, I said yes. I talked on the phone. Then they emailed me, said, radio shipped to you today. And my reply to that email was, and something along the lines of, enjoyed talking to you on the phone yesterday. Thanks for the radio. Look forward to getting it and trying it out. One question, though. Is there a service manual available for this radio? I looked online. I didn't find one. I got up the next morning and looked at my emails. You know what my reply was? Bam. They emailed me a PDF copy of the factory service manual. That, right there. Even if this was a piece of junk, I'd probably recommend this thing over other radios because it can be serviced. The problem with modern radios is they've gotten very advanced. Used to be, you could maybe get by without a schematic and troubleshoot almost any problem. Nowadays, with microprocessors, very tiny parts, no markings on the boards for most of the passive components, multi-layer boards, it's really hard to work on a radio without a service manual, or at the very least, the schematic. So, yeah, full service manual, alignment procedure, block diagrams, all the schematics, the layouts. Now, luckily, I have a wide format 11x17 printer, so I did large foldouts for, like, the schematics, but CPU schematic, main schematic, all the board layout diagrams, everything you would expect to find in a service manual. Full parts listings, the whole 9 yards. So, President, that right there is from a tech standpoint, I would recommend, because I don't sell radios, so it's not like I'm going to be pushing this radio to sell so I make money off of it. I don't sell radios. I never have, and I'm never going to. The only thing I do is repair them. That is the most important thing you could do for me. The service manual. So million thumbs up. Like I say, I just can't give them enough thumbs up on that. Now, the Roger beep. Actually, I need the service manual for that. The Roger beep, I think the problem is, actually talked with Mark, because Mark has one of these as well. I asked him, I thought, well, possibly I've got a defective radio. And I'm not talking about, design flaw. I thought maybe it was assembly line manufacturing. Bad solder joint somewhere, something, shit happens. I understand that in manufacturing. No, Mark says exactly the same way. Almost no modulation for the Roger beep. You just can't hear it on a receiving radio. Talking to Mark, I think we figured it out. It's pretty much the problem is they're using the same beep for the Roger beep as they are for the key beep, which comes out of the speaker. They're using the same line. They're just, instead of it being a single tone when you press a button, when it's putting out the beep for the Roger beep, it's a that multiple tone beep. That's the only difference. But they're using the same line and it just branches off, but it's not being switched. And the problem is, it comes in through the switching transistor, the transmit, or the Roger beep mute function here. The problem is, this is our microphone amplifier, okay? It's a dual op amp, and it also forms a low pass audio filter as well. But the problem is, if you look where that audio comes in, it goes through a 560k ohm resistor, through a 100 puff capacitor, through another 220k resistor, and another 220k resistor, and then has another non-audio friendly capacitor, a 220 puff capacitor going to ground. Now these capacitors, we're kind of thinking that because this is being digitally made in the processor, it's a digital audio signal, it's going to be very squarish and harsh sounding. So with those capacitors, they're probably trying to do some basically like wave shaping, make it more of a sine wave to make it sound better, which it does sound fine if you could just actually hear it on the receiving radio. The problem is, by the time it goes through all this crap, the signal's so low, there's nothing hardly for this poor little op amp to amplify, because it's only like 50 microvolts, I think it was. Or no, 50 millivolts. But yeah, there's just not enough through this one op amp. They really need it to run through both stages of the dual op amp. The problem is, if you do that, if you were to cut the trace right here and hook it up over here, that's what Mark and I are both going to experiment with this and see if we can come up with a fix for the radios as they are. But the problem being is, we're thinking that maybe if we hook it up at the input of the first stage of the dual op amp, it may be, what it might do is, because that's also your microphone input, because remember, that's what this is, the microphone amplifier. It may shunt through that mute function here. It may basically draw off too much sound. You're actually out, your audio from the microphone, and then your mic audio is going to drop. So your modulation through the mic's going to drop. You'll get your Roger beep sound volume up, but then your actual modulation, your voice, is going to disappear. So you really need to tinker with that a little bit. Another thing, this does not, the final in this thing, pardon my French, holy crap. This uses an IRF 520 as the driver, and I had to look this one up when I first looked at this. It's I get a schematic up here so I can see it, a UFZ24N MOSFET. I had to look that up online, and I'd have to look it up again because it's actually been several days since I actually looked that up. I got the service manual file from them days before I got the radio, so I actually looked that up because I wasn't familiar with that MOSFET transistor. Looked it up. It's something like a 20 or 25 watt MOSFET? Ridiculously high for a CB radio. So what kind of power can you get out of this thing? Well, out of the box, AM was fine. It was at like 3.8 watts. People always ask, why don't they set these radios perfectly at 4 watts at 100% modulation on AM and 12 watts on sideband? That's because if they sell a radio and it's slightly above FCC specifications, and the FCC were to pull one off the shelf and check it in their lab, they could fine them. So they always err in the side of caution and set radios low. But like I say, it was at 3.8% at like 89.5% modulation on AM, which is about standard what you'd expect for an out-of-the-box radio set to FCC specs. Because even the alignment procedure for this tells you to set it for 3.8 watts. at 90% modulation, plus or minus 3%. So it was within even their own specs. Sideband, on the other hand, no, not so much. Not a problem with the radio. That was just the initial alignment when this thing was flying down the assembly line. Output power was set on this, or the ALC was set for like 8.8486 watts, something like that. So yeah, that was low. It should be, according, factory alignment procedure, they tell you to set sideband power for 11 watts. FCC spec is 12. Just a simple twist of the ALC. So this radio is now actually, I set it right at 4 watts, 100% modulation. So on AM it's got a 12 watt peak power, and on sideband it's doing dead nuts on 12 watts. Now, if you adjust the AM carrier on this thing, because like I say, this has that will do potentially a lot of power. And honestly, it will. If you stick your golden screwdriver in here, take your little golden screwdriver, plate this thing in gold and cram it down in this radio, I got 16 watts out of that. Just turn the AM power up. Whoop. That's all I did. 16 watt carrier. Dude, you'll vaporize this radio if you set it that high. There's no heat sink on the back of this thing. It's got this little bracket here that adds a little bit of heat sinking in this area. But yeah, you'll vaporize that thing if you try and transmit. The biggest problem is you'll never get it to work. Even though it can do that much carrier power, the radio can't provide enough audio modulation. You can turn the carrier up to like maybe 5, even 6 watts and get, I think it was at like 5.8 or 6 watts is actually where I found the top end. I could set the carrier at like 5.8 to 6 watts and still get 100% modulation. There's enough audio, the radio is capable of enough audio to modulate to 100% modulation with like 5.8 to 6 watts carrier. Once I turn the carrier up higher than that, it starts to clip and it starts to distort because the radio just doesn't have enough audio power to modulate any farther. But yeah, so that's actually a good thing though. That tells me probably this final, as long as this thing doesn't take a lightning strike and, a really high static, through the antenna, that's probably going to be very durable because that's actually a fairly high power final. Set this thing up the way it's supposed to be, 4 watt AM, 12 watt sideband, that thing should outlast you and me. So yeah, I think that's really good. Build quality, aluminum U-bracket, pretty much standard in the industry for sideband radios nowadays. Does have steel reinforcement plates on the side, because you also have to remember your radio mounting bracket's going to screw on there. So that has been reinforced. There's actually your main processor. It's on the display board. And then this has a slave processor right there. Another nice thing to see in this, it is alignable. A good example of a non-alignable radio is the new 980 SSB from Uniden. They did away with all of the adjustments. There's no receiver adjustments anymore. What's in there is exactly what you see. Those little black dots, or actually the bigger black dots right there. Those are fixed inductors. That's what Uniden did. They did away with the tunable transformers and just put fixed inductors in there. There's no adjustment anymore. So you can't fine-tune a receiver for absolute maximum peak performance. And I have not adjusted a receiver. This receiver is still, the only adjustment I did was I turned the carrier up a little bit, turned the modulation to exactly 100%, and set ALC for exactly 12 watts on sideband. That's the only thing I've adjusted on this. The receiver is great out of the box, but like I said, I'm sure because there are adjustments, I can probably get it a little bit better. There's your SWR bridge for that amazing SWR function. Your crystal filters, lots of crystals. It does have crystals all over the board. Then your ceramic filters. Like I say, this has 2 PLL chips, one for the CB, one for the FM weather receiver. It's a very clean design. There's no bodge components on here. So it tells me it was well thought out with the exception of the Roger beep. Somebody dropped the ball on that one. Now personally, I care less. If I had 20 of these radios, I'd care less about that. I don't use Roger beeps, so I don't care if it doesn't really work. But for other people that like Roger beeps, that could be a killer. So President, you do need to work on that Roger beep, get the level up. Top side here, The only thing that, and I did not look this up on the schematic I see, I don't know if that's actually what I would call a bodge diode. There is a diode here from the front to the back. That just may not have been avoidable, because a lot of times that's why they'll do a part like that. There was just no way to get a trace, because this is really densely packed, all those resistors and capacitors around that processor there. They just may not have been able to get a circuit trace over to the processor here where they needed to hook up. So yeah, they'll do something like that. Just put a bodge diode or whatever component on there. That's pretty much, and that's no problem. Works just fine. Otherwise, good quality board. Seems the microphone. Now that's one thing I got to tell you. This microphone, it'll pick up a mouse fart at 100 yards in a windstorm. This thing is really sensitive. I'm sure electric microphone. Oh, by the way, it does have channel up and down buttons in it, so it's 6-pin jack. I like microphones that actually have the channel up down buttons. That's a handy feature. But yeah, actually the microphone, the factory mic actually sounds good. And it's really sensitive. Like I say, man, this thing, even with the mic gain on the radio turned down the whole way, I can still reach, I got to talk loud, but I can still reach 100% modulation with the mic gain turned down the whole way. So, overall impressions, I really like it. The only thing I think I missed here is there's that extra jack on the back here for the Vox. Try and get the angle right so you can see what it's actually saying, but Vox mic. So if you do get one of the optional microphones, like I said, I'm not sure what they actually are. If it's a lapel, headset, I'm not sure what type it is. I need to go to their website and see. But there it is. This side of the radio does get warmer than this side, but there's lots of regulators along here. By no stretch of the imagination does it get hot. It just gets warm. So yeah, lots of aluminum. It's dissipating heat just fine. I like it. I think it's a really nice radio. Like I say, adjacent channel rejection, I really need to listen to this radio on air on one of those days where the skip is just pouring in. That'll be the best test. Other than that, if they fix that Roger beat problem, I don't care about it, but for other people, President, if you fix that Roger beat problem, I think you got a winner here. This is a really nice little radio. So I'll give it a double thumbs up for overall, thumbs down for the Roger beep, and a million thumbs up for the service manual. That's, my God, tech support. It's just disappearing in the industry. So there you go. There's my thoughts and review on the President McKinley.